Joining me to discuss the conflicts between Gaza and Israel is a global affairs analyst, Nweke. Thank you so much for joining us on World Now. The conflict between Israel and the Palestinians has been a very long struggle. How would you describe the Egyptian involvement and its interests?
Thank you, Ibrahim, for having me. Well, the Egyptian intervention that has indeed, delivered the ceasefire that appears to have held sway now since yesterday being Sunday is very much welcome because, come to think of it, Egypt is a regional player there. And like they say in business, business abhors an unsettled environment. So it is also in Israel's best interest that there is peace there. But let us look at, a sustained peace because that is actually what is needed in that region. The purpose of this particular truce is because the humanitarian catastrophe continues to rise. And so the concern is first and foremost to halt that humanitarian catastrophe that is mounting on a daily basis. But a lot, in fact, work still has to begin in terms of how do you actually stop the Israeli imperialist activities around that region in Palestine so that ultimate peace will occur. I mean, some people will say, after all, the jihadist movement are actually sending rockets to Israel, targeting civilians and so on and so forth. But the whole story started somewhere. And I believe that ultimately that is what needs to be addressed if sustainable peace is to be brought to that region.
Well, what we have seen actually in recent years are short-term agreements that would not address the root cause of the problem because the mediation has focused on conflict management and not conflict resolution. So from your own perspective, would these processes produce effective results?
In the short term, yes. At least some semblance of normalcy is beginning to, take place in that region. The carnage has temporarily stopped, and one can only hope that, it stops for a long time. At least the threat of hospitals running out of fuel to run their operations has ceased because as of yesterday being Sunday, there was this fear that they had enough supply of fuel to run hospital operations only for 3 days. At least that is now guaranteed. Food is beginning to find ways into essential commodities are now getting into Palestine. So in the short term, yes, that is fine. And at least people can begin to lead some semblance of normal life. One can then hope that with, Joe Biden on the saddle, at least for now, that he will deliver on what, he promised, which is that, peace and justice everywhere is important to the United States of America. And so when they begin to, look at it from that perspective, it is expected that Israel will continue to be the ally of the United States. They will continue to protect them, but also fairness for Palestine is something that has to be taken into consideration. And from the activities of Egypt that we have seen in terms of their intervention in this particular episode, I think it is important to now recognize them as very powerful, essential regional players. And teaming up with the United States, one can then hope that, the sustainable peace that has eluded them for so long will now begin to gradually, return using this temporal peace as a springboard.
Makes sense. But just like you said a little earlier, the civilians are actually the ones bearing the brunt of the fight between Israel and Palestine. There have been more than 500 rockets fired in Israel, sirens heard in Tel Aviv. So to what extent do you think Israel is looking for a way out?
Well, I think Israel, if you ask, an average Israeli, I think the point they will make to you is that they have the right of, existence, and when they exist, they have to survive. And so their actions are actually geared towards their own survival as a people, I do not think, I mean, if you analyze the situation critically, you will find that Israel's survival, despite a statement that may have been made previously by various, Palestinian leaders, I think the concentration now, in terms of that sustainable peace, is two countries living side by side one another as neighbors. And that is achievable. And there are signs that, with both sides being objective and being respectful of each other's sovereignty, that is achievable. And the international community, stands a good chance of making that happen. It's a long path to walk, but I believe it's got to start from somewhere.
In all of this, before I let you go, what exactly do you then think is needed for lasting peace? What needs to be done for the issues to be resolved so that a cycle of violence does not happen over and over?
Yeah. Given the shortage of time, I will put it, in an abstract form. Now, it is a simple matter of give and take. They have both sides have, very serious, differences. And it has to be realized that in a negotiation of this nature, you need to give in order to receive. I think that is where to put it. And then trying to break it down, essentially what that means is that Israel has a right of existence just as Palestinians have that right of sovereignty, that right of existence as an independent state that determines their future and the future of their people. Essentially, that is what has to happen. And of course, the fine lines are where, like they say, the devil is in the details. But those details, with goodwill from both sides, I believe it is achievable.
Well, we'll continue to monitor the situation in Israel and Palestine, Gaza generally, and see how all of these things would definitely, end. It's just peace is exactly what the world actually wants to see, the international community. Thank you so much, Global Affairs Analyst Collins Nweke, live for us from Belgium. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.